That is because a few minutes of crying will not undo all the love and care mom and dad have displayed day and night. Hi, I'm Justine, and this is Infinite Mamabilities. One of the things I talk about in this channel is on becoming Babywise. You probably already know that because you clicked this video, but if you didn't, this is a sleep training method used by millions of parents around the world for the past I don't know how many years. But this is what I used for my 3 kids really successfully. It was extremely beneficial to our family, and so I'm just here to share the same joy that I experienced so that you can too as you're building your own family and raising your little tiny infants as well. So I have this series called Summarized Babywise, and basically that's all I do for each chapter. I give you a summary so that you don't have to read too much into it if you don't want to, or maybe you want to think about getting the book and you know, this is going to help you decide if you want that. Or maybe you have the book and you're just too lazy to read. And so I'm here doing the work for you and giving you all the points that you need to know in a summary of each chapter. And today we're talking about chapter 6. It's called Wake Times and Naps. So in this chapter, you will learn things like what you will need to do for your baby depending on their age during their wake times. Before this, we talked about, parenting philosophies and getting your child to self-soothe and sleep on their own, things like that. But in this chapter, you're going to be learning about what to do during baby's wake times, how to spend wake times the best way possible, specifically for their age. After that, it talks about nap times and basic sleep needs, also depending on age. So this is important to know so that we're giving our babies what they need based on their developmental milestones at their certain age, based on how much milk they need at their age, based on how much time they can actually stay awake at their age. So all that good stuff. And then next is naps and crying. So talks about crying a little bit and the importance of allowing them to learn how to self-soothe, just like we talked about before. And then it gives you some troubleshooting for the waking early nap kids. Okay, so let's start with wake time activities. Again, there's a whole list, so I won't go through all of them because this is just a summary. But basically, you're going to want to get your baby tired. That's going to look different depending on the age. You're not going to expect your 3-week-old to be practicing standing up so that they'll get tired. Or you're not going to practice, tummy time with your 9-month-old. But basically, the idea is get your baby tired, do your research on what you can be doing during wake times at this age for your baby, and don't get them overtired. I remember with my kids, it was like a trial and error of how long each of them would be able to stay awake or what was their optimal wake time. And it was different for all of them, but I had to try that and I had to learn it. It was really through trial and error. What was making them overtired? What was overstimulating them that made it harder for them to get to sleep? When they had the optimal wake time, they were able to fall asleep better. When they were just bored during the wake time, it was harder for them to get to sleep because they weren't, if I just left them there and to do nothing and they weren't being stimulated in any way. For newborns, however, this wake time is going to be really, really minimal because all they're going to want to do is sleep. You're even going to have a hard time keeping them awake during breastfeeding or however you're feeding. During that feeding time alone, it's hard to keep them awake. And usually the tendency is, okay, they fell asleep while eating. Let me just let them stay asleep and finish their nap this way. But that's not going to be how it works. They got to be awake so that their digestive system is moving, so that their bodies are being accustomed to the routine and the feed wake sleep cycle. So make sure they're awake, and it might be really minimal. At one point I was keeping the baby up for like 10 minutes and it was more than enough. What's important though is you keep that feed wake sleep cycle. Okay, the next part of this chapter talks about nap times and basic sleep needs. It has a list of how much time is spent in sleep per age and also the number of naps. And I'm going to give you a quick rundown because I can't go through everything, but just what you need to know. From weeks 1 to 5, they're at about 5 to 6 naps per day. From weeks 6 to 12, they're at about 4 to 6 naps per day. From 13 to 24 weeks, they're at about 3 to 4 naps per day. And then from 25 to 52 weeks, they're at 2 to 3 naps and eventually just 2 naps a day. And that just means they're growing older and life is getting harder. Okay, next, naps and crying. This is always a very difficult part of Babywise and of any sleep training, but the importance of letting our babies learn how to self-soothe is so beneficial in the long run. If you're a first-time sleep trainer, even if with me when I was on my 3rd baby, it was still really hard, but what I learned is that crying stage of their lives when they're learning how to self-soothe is so tiny in comparison to the benefits of what it brings them in their infant years and even up until their toddler years. I'm going to read one part from this section for you. It says, crying for 10, 15, or even 20 minutes will not harm your baby physically or emotionally. Your baby will not lose brain cells, experience a drop in IQ, or have feelings of rejection that will leave him manic depressive at age 30. None of my kids are 30 yet, but I can attest to that they don't even remember, what happened in those times, a couple of weeks of crying, because what really matters as they're growing is building relationships with them and showering them with love in every way possible as they continue to grow. And so it continues on to say, that is because a few minutes of crying will not undo all the love and care mom and dad have displayed day and night. Who wants a fussy baby who is high need, never satisfied, unable to soothe himself, and living in a state of discontent? And that is what's important to me. I wanted my babies, and if I have future babies, I want my babies to be happy and healthy. At one point I was doing whatever I could just to make the baby stop crying, but that wasn't necessarily good. Not necessarily good for my baby, and definitely not good for me because I was exhausted and I was burnt out and I just didn't know what to do anymore. So those few minutes of crying during nap time before they get a good sleep is going to be worth it. Okay, next part of this chapter is the fatigued baby. Sometimes we think that baby just needs to keep crying and crying and crying, and then they end up not sleeping at all through any naps. But there is such a thing as a fatigued baby, and sometimes what's needed, this chapter says, is just for your baby to go ahead and fall asleep on you, whatever you can do to get that baby to get that sleep so that we can restart again and go back to that cycle that we're after. It doesn't have to be perfection in the first day that we start. Actually, no day really has to be perfection. It's really not about reaching that perfect schedule. It's about having a standard and going for that every day. And the days will look different. Sometimes my babies were fatigued because we were out of town and they didn't get the sleep that they needed. Sometimes we had events where we weren't at home. They couldn't take their naps, so they also couldn't get the sleep they needed at those times. And what happens sometimes is we think that, okay, let me keep the baby awake all day so that at night they'll have a really good sleep. But you try that and you'll find that your baby wakes up even more maybe in the middle of the night. It doesn't guarantee good sleep because sleep begets sleep. So it's important to, if you have a fatigued baby, to get them good rest and then get back on that schedule when you can. And the last part of this chapter talks about waking early from naps, and that can be so extremely frustrating. It's a really long list of what you can do to find out why and what you can do to help them and what they recommend to help your baby not do that. But if you want, you can go instead to watch my videos, the 45-minute intruder, and I have another one. I'll put it up here because I forgot what it's called, but it's about troubleshooting when babies wake up too early. And that's about it for this chapter, wake times and naps. If you have any questions, leave them below. I'll do my best to get back to them. And if you want to know more about Babywise, check out my entire playlist on YouTube called How Does Babywise Work? Follow me on Instagram and TikTok, Infinite Mamabilities, and we'll see you next time. Bye. Oh yeah, and subscribe, of course.